Wilderspin was born in 1791 in London. He was educated by his father. He couldn't understand why children who were going to some sort of school, there were dame schools and that sort of thing in those days, he couldn't understand why they cried on their way to and from school. And apparently, he said it was because they were caned for not knowing something which they hadn't been taught. So he was very concerned about that sort of thing. He met a guy called James Buchanan, who had come to set up the first infant school in Westminster in 1820, and they became very good friends. But that's where he started, in London, and he toured the country, founding hundreds of infant schools, and he was actually given a civil list pension by Queen Victoria in 1846 whilst he was here in Barton for his services to education. And Wilderspin designed the room we're in, complete with its gallery, its lesson posts, teaching posts down the centre here, where the children would gather. There would be initially a strip of metal, probably brass, let into the floor, and the children would put their toes to the line, hence the expression, apparently, toeing the line. That's what they've said anyway. And it'd be either a teacher or a pupil teacher instructing the group here. And there'd be different lessons put on these various boards. The gas lighting is something which would have been here in the 1840s, not initially, because the gasworks wasn't built until 1846, but there would be gas lighting here, and we've reinstated that, so you've got the real feel of the place. Also put leaded lights in the windows so that they do reflect the appearance in Wilderspin's time. Wilderspin was so popular, he attracted people, children who otherwise probably wouldn't have come here. They had to pay to come to this school, and they weren't forced to do. And the parents would probably expect them to earn a few pence by going out into the fields or into the brickyards or something like that and doing menial work. It was Wilderspin used this as a model school, really, and he taught teachers and governesses as well. He was the first person to write books on infant education. He was a great pioneer. He was light years ahead of his time, and many of his ideas are still being put into practice now. A lot of the lessons in today's schools are based on Wilderspin's philosophy, on his work, on his teaching. The playground is an important part of Wilderspin's teaching methods. He regarded it as the outdoor classroom, and much of the time, when the weather was decent, the children would spend time in the playground. They would be allowed to learn through play. They'd be supervised, but at a distance. If anything got out of hand, the master was there, or the mistress was there to intervene. But the children were left to get on together, really. Wilderspin's philosophy really was based on love. He didn't believe in corporal punishment at all. The playground here is basically as it was in Wilderspin's time. He insisted that the younger children had 6 times as much space as the older children, because it was used as an outdoor classroom and they needed room to run around. The beds round the side are a feature of Wilderspin's playgrounds, garden playgrounds. He would have all sorts of things planted in there. The children would be taught to take a great interest in nature. He was one that introduced nature walks for the children, and he also realised their particular needs. Little children need to go to the loo quite often. Originally there was just one privy with 3 holes in, And he realised very quickly, especially after the school had been extended, that that was in no way satisfactory. So he insisted on an ash pit being converted, but that was basically at Wilderspin's insistence. He originally wanted this playground to be either paved with brick or flagstones, but the school managers couldn't afford that, so it was basically chalk stone that was brought in here. We've put flags down in the reconstruction because that's what Wilderspin had got in mind. Well, we're now in the classroom as opposed to the schoolroom. Wilderspin advocated classrooms where children could be segregated by their age and ability. The schoolroom was designed for whole school teaching along with its gallery, but here in the classroom there's more of a one-to-one relationship between the teacher and the pupil. This classroom was originally formed in 1879. It's been fitted out to resemble what would be expected in the 1890s. And the idea is to compare and contrast between the Wilderspin schoolroom at the other end of the building and this later Victorian classroom. The gas lighting with its mantles, as opposed to the open flame burners in the schoolroom. The open fire here, which we use in the winter months. Its original grate with its fire guard, and it's even got its original coal scuttle, which was in use when the school was in operation. The desks here, the long desks, are Victorian, and they're an example of what would be in here in the Victorian period. The school was derelict, closed in 1978, was derelict, and it was threatened with demolition. It was going to be demolished to make way for a police station really, or failing that, a car park. And there was a group of people got together and worked very hard to save it. It was a long and bitter battle to save the building. So by the time restoration started, the place was very derelict. It was boarded up, there was water pouring in, full of dry rot, wet rot, you name it. The floors were just collapsing. It was in a very, very poor state. So we're delighted that it's actually restored and you're able to come here today.